Watch out. Gracie, get up. Gracie, I'm not going to read you unless you get up. Just like...
Can you please walk in the street?
Jump, man. Come on. Get up. I'll read to you. Come here. Come here. I'll read to you. Then I got... Come here. Come here. Get under the covers. I'll read to you till you closer. No. Come here. You want this one? You want me to read this one too? No, that's Abe's Fine Shapes. That's a learning book. Let's read a book to you. Okay? Here.
Abe's Fine Shapes.
Okay.
Shapes.
Okay, you ready?
I can't see the book.
No. Okay.
Look at your pictures.
What? Because I'm gonna get a shower and everything still. And I'm gonna read to you so you go to sleep. Okay? So I don't need my pajamas on just yet. I'm just gonna read to you. So you can fall asleep. Come here. Okay, this is called Philip and the 99 Frogs. Okay, by Stella F. Rapport. Okay? Philip and the 99 Frogs. Senior authors Albert J. Harris and May Knight Clark. Macmillan Company, New York. Okay. Philip sat very still on a rock. He sat so still he hardly breathed. He didn't blink an eye. He didn't move a finger. He didn't stir a toe. A big, fat bullfrog sat on his foot. The bullfrog thought Philip was a rock. That was what Philip wanted. He wanted the bullfrog to think he was a rock, so they could be friends. He knew he couldn't be friends with an animal if he scared it by jumping up and down. When Philip looked into Frog Pond at first, all he saw was dirty, green water. But Philip knew how to look hard at the water, and soon he saw the frogs. There were hundreds and hundreds of dirty, green frogs, just the color of the water in the frog pond. When the frogs sang, a big bubble swelled under each frog's chin. Here I come, tup-chuck-ung, tup-chuck-ung. They all sang together louder and louder with a deep down boom, like a big kettle drum. On and on they sang. To Philip it sounded wonderful. He liked it better than the songs of the insects on a hot summer day. It was sweeter than the whistles of birds. When he awoke early in the morning, he even liked it better than singing in school. Philip loved everything the frogs did. He loved the way they stayed underwater with just two big, wide-open eyes above the water. The way they suddenly would swing up. The way they would flip out their long tongues to catch insects. The way they would sat so still. The way they made noises like kettle drums. Philip was trying to sit as still as a frog. All he needed was practice. There was just one trouble. It was a big trouble, however, and it worried Philip. Many houses were being built nearby. Huge machines cut down trees as if they were weeds. They broke up the earth in great chunks. Men and machines were tearing the woods down. They were coming closer and closer to the pond. What will happen when they get to the frog pond, wondered Philip. What will happen to all the lovely frogs? That was the big trouble that worried Philip. As he wondered and worried, he moved his foot just a tiny bit. The bullfrog hopped away and leaped into the pond with a great splash. One day, Philip got a terrible surprise when he went down to Frog Pond. A huge, ugly machine was sitting right in the middle of Frog Pond. Philip looked at the water. He looked hard and long, but the water was such a dark and dirty green, darker than ever, that he couldn't see any frogs at all. "What are you doing to the pond?" Philip asked the workman. "We're filling it in," replied a man. "A building is going up." "What will happen to all the animals that live in the pond?" asked Philip. The man laughed. "What animals? There's nothing there but some old frogs." "That's what I mean. The frogs. You will hurt my frogs," said Philip, almost crying. He tried to keep the tears back. "What frogs?" asked the man. Now he looked unhappy too. "The frogs that you said were all that's in the pond," replied Philip. "Look, young fellow, we didn't touch any frogs, and if you're so worried about them, why don't you take them out?" "That's just what I'm going to do," said Philip. He dipped his hand in the water, feeling around. He soon touched a frog. He grabbed at it. It felt soft and rubbery as it slipped through his fingers. He tried to catch another frog. He had it. It was oozy as mud. It oozed away. Philip tried again and again. Every frog oozed away as soon as he touched it. He couldn't catch even one frog. The men stopped working. The water quieted down. Philip slipped and splashed and slid around, but he couldn't catch any frogs. The men cheered him on. "There goes a big one! Get it! Hold it!" they shouted. "What's the matter, kid? Got butter on your fingers?" Philip got angry. "You can't catch a frog either," he snapped. "Sure we can catch frogs," said one man. "Let's help the kid catch his oozy frogs." "Save the oozy frogs!" they all yelled, jumping around. The workmen splashed in the water, getting good and wet. Not one of them caught a frog. Finally, Philip said, "Thanks for trying to help me, but you can't catch any frogs either. I'll ask my mother how to catch frogs." Philip went home and found his mother with her head in the oven. It wasn't all the way in. She was only looking at a cake she was baking. "That sure smells good," Philip sniffed happily. "Is the cake ready yet?" His mother tested the cake to see if it was done. "No, not yet." Then Philip remembered that he had come to ask about the frogs. "Ma, how can I catch a frog?" he asked quickly. "Put salt on its tail." Philip giggled. "Oh, Mother, stop joking." His mother became serious. "Use a net. Make one yourself. Get a long stick and tie a bag on one end." "Can you help me make a net, Mom?" "I guess I can. I'll do it if you play quietly outdoors this afternoon while I have the ladies here for the Red Cross sewing circle," Philip agreed. Philip's mother picked out some clean cloth and sat down at her sewing machine. In about 2 minutes she made a bag out of the cloth. She helped Philip string a wire through the open and tie it on the broomstick. After having a sandwich of milk, Philip took the 2 large jars and his new net and hurried to Frog Pond. Get your finger under your nose. He waited quietly until he saw a frog. Then, in a second, he caught it up in his net. It was that easy. The workmen stopped work to watch with great interest. Philip thought they were glad to stop working for any reason at all. When he had the jars filled with frogs, Philip ran home. Philip dashed through the front door. Then he remembered his mother's meeting at the Red Cross sewing circle. He turned around to tiptoe back out the door, but it was too late. At that moment, a frog croaked. "Ricket, tickle." "What's that?" asked Miss Frank. 30 eyes turned on Philip. He stood still as a rock, still as a frog. "Philip!" yelled his mother in a voice he had never heard before. "What have you got there?" Philip didn't answer because his mother could look through the glass of the jars and see what he had. He stood more still than a rock that was not rolling, more still than a frog that was not jumping. Is he getting in trouble? Is that his mom yelling at him?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
No.
"Gracie, and what are you doing with those in those jars?"
No.
Just then Miss Frank spotted the frogs and screamed. She startled Mrs. Parker, who dropped her cup of coffee on Alice the cat. With a howl, Alice sprang up and brushed against the pitcher of cream. The cream began to spill out and drip on Mrs. Brown's leg. "Uh-oh!" Mrs. Brown stamped her feet and waved her arms, knocking over the bird cage. The cage fell on top of the goldfish bowl. Crash! Fish, water, and glass scattered all over the floor and rug. Alice watched the helpless fish flapping around. Suddenly, she grabbed one and ate it before anyone could stop her. My fish!" cried Miss Phillips' mother, chasing Alice across the room. But Alice slipped past her and bumped into Philip, who was still standing on tiptoe. He fell over, letting the jars tumble down, the covers rolling off, and the frogs hopped out. Which all goes to show how one thing leads to another, thought Philip as he jumped around trying to catch his dear frogs. See? Spilled the cream on the cat knocked the lady knocked the bird knocked the fish killed the frog, the cat ate the fish. And they all knocked into the frogs.
The cat ate the fish.
Yep. The frogs were very much frightened. They were frightened because they had never been in a house before. All the ladies were screaming. Their screams only made the frogs become even more frightened. "Philip!" Sit back, I can't see. "Philip, catch those frogs and get them out of here!" shouted Philip's mother in an angry voice. Philip thought it was a rather silly thing for his mother to say, as she could see that he was trying to do just that. Some ladies were standing on top of the good chairs with their shoes on. "Oh," explained Philip, "if I ever did that." Other ladies ran to the kitchen and hid behind the door, which was a swinging door. Whenever the lady dashed through it, it swung madly back and forth, back and forth. It hit another one in the way. That made the lady scream all the more. At last, Philip got 10 frogs back in the jars. One was still missing, but he decided to look for it later. Now he wondered where to put the frogs. After all, there was no use saving the frogs if they had no place to live happily. "Get out of this house this minute!" his mother's shouted voice broke up. Philip's wondering. He guessed she really meant it, so he went outside that minute. Philip got an idea. He knew the meeting would last all afternoon. He would put the frogs in one of the ladies' cars while he went back to the frog pond. Then, when he returned, he would think of where to keep them all. He opened the door of the car and placed the jars on the seat. The frogs looked very crowded inside the jars. A car is a very fine place for frogs to play, thought Philip as he took the covers off the jars and to let the frogs out. He put all the frogs in the jars.
What?
He took all the frogs out of the jars and put them in the cars. So now the cars are full of frogs. How they loved the red seats. They leaped from front seat to back seat. What's wrong with you? You good? You comfy? They jumped down to the floor and up the seats, and then to the tops of the seats. Up and down they went. What jumpers! Philip had to go. He didn't forget to close the windows, leaving open just a crack so the frogs would have some air. "Have fun, frogs," he called over his shoulder as he ran off. Down at the pond, Philip caught many more frogs easily. Everything takes practice, as Mother says. When he returned to the house, he was surprised to see the ladies leaving, although it was still early. He saw Miss Dawson go to their car, the one that had the frogs in it. Now Philip really had a worry. If Mrs. Dawson ever sat on a frog, it would become flat as a pancake, for she was an enormous lady. I think he just called her fat. We don't do that though, do we? Miss Dawson got in and sat down, and like a firecracker popped up out of the car again. She was screaming like a fire alarm. Other ladies ran over to see what the trouble was. They waved their hands and pocketbooks at the frogs. "Get out of there! Get out of there!" The frogs were only too glad to jump out. Philip lay flat on the glass so he could see the frogs as they hopped out. He counted them 1, 2, 3. When he reached 10, he sighed, "All safe." He would get those frogs later. Now he had to hide the new frogs he had caught. Philip wished he could ask Pam to help him, but Pam, his little sister, was only 5. How old are you going to be?
5.
That's right. None of his friends lived near enough. That left just Mindy next door. Philip didn't want to ask Mindy to help. She talked too much. Philip needs somebody who can keep a secret. Philip went around to the back of the house. He saw a basket of fresh, clean clothes just off the line and waiting by the kitchen door that Ellen to iron, thought Philip as he flipped the jars of frogs inside the cover carefully. Then he ran through the bushes to the back door of Mindy's house. He knocked at her back door. Then he rang the doorbell. Mindy came to the door and asked, "Who's there?" Although she could see him through the glass top of the door. That's what I didn't like about Mindy, Philip, though. She knows who I am. Then he yelled, "Say, Mindy, do you want to help me?" "No," replied Mindy. "Help you with what?" "With a secret," Philip whispered. Mindy was curious. "Sure, I'll help. I like a secret. What is it?" She came outside. Philip decided to tell her the whole story. Mindy giggled when she heard that the workmen couldn't catch any frogs. She was delighted when Philip described Mrs. Dawson getting into her car and screaming like a fire alarm, which Philip copied very well. It looks as if Mindy might turn into a helpful friend after all. First, we have to get more frogs out of the pond, said Philip. They hunted around for something big and roomy to hold the frogs. They found some large cans and 2 covered pails. They took Mindy's brother's wagon to carry all the supplies. They also took Mindy's mother's largest sieve to use as a net. That was Mindy's idea. When Philip and Mindy got to the frog pond, the workman called out, "So you have someone to help you, and plenty of supplies." "Don't mind them," whispered Philip. "They have to say something about everything." Mindy watched Philip catch a frog. She touched it lightly with one finger. "Ugh, it's so oozy." She rubbed her fingers on her dress. "What do you mean, ugh? A big help you're going to be." "Do they bite?" asked Mindy. "Are you afraid, cat-like?" "Those ladies in the sewing circle?" asked Philip. "No, I'm not," snapped Mindy. She held her breath as she took the fat bullfrog in both hands. "See, I'm not afraid," she said proudly. Mindy caught on fast. She and Philip soon had more frogs than they could count. The workmen were watching them. One said, "Isn't she the clever one? She's got her mother's sieve, and tonight her mother will pour the soup through it." The men laughed. "Maybe they'll have frog legs for dinner, too," said another man. "Some joke," whispered Philip. "Every time I come down here, they talk about eating frogs' legs for dinner." When Philip and Mindy had filled every jar, can, and pail. You okay? You getting comfy?
No.
What?
I'm hot.
Here.
I want coffee.
Okay. Went directly to the kitchen door. They closed the basket. The clothes basket was gone. They peeked in the kitchen. There it was, safe. Look at Ellen humming to herself. She loves to hum when she does the dishes. Philip guessed that Ellen would start the ironing when she finished the dishes. "We have to get those frogs out of the basket," he said, thinking hard. "You talk to Ellen," said Mindy. "Keep her busy and leave the rest to me." They parked the wagon outside and went to the kitchen. "Hi, Ellen," they said cheerfully. "Well, hello. If it isn't Mr. Frogcatcher himself and his friend." That was the way Ellen said hello to them. Philip paid no attention and went on sweetly. "Is there anything good to eat around here?" "Sure is. There's lots of cake." "It seems the ladies were in a bit of a hurry to leave." Ellen exploded in laughter. While Ellen went to get some cake, Mindy shoved the clothes basket across the kitchen floor and out the door. She pushed it so fast that she didn't see where it was going until it stopped hard. She heard a scream. The scream came from Pam, Philip's little sister. Mindy quickly sat down on top of the clothes in the basket. "What are you doing with our clean clothes?" shouted Pam. "Get off." "No, I like to sit here. It's so nice and soft." So Mindy spreading herself over the clothes. She was sitting in the clothes basket, wasn't she? With all the clean clothes. There she is. Pam with only about half Mindy's size, but she did not stop her from grabbing Mindy by her 2 feet. She gave a good yank. "Stop!" cried Mindy as she tumbled over with the clothes falling around. There lay the jars of frogs. Ellen and Philip ran out to see what all the noise was about. "Well, I never!" cried Ellen. "Frogs in the clean clothes? That's just too many frogs for me. Get them out of there," Philip thought. Whoever heard that before, as he and Mindy picked up the jars and the frogs. Now they had to tell Pam the whole story, too. It was just as well. They could use her help. By this time, Philip decided that the only safe place to keep all the frogs was upstairs in the bathtub. Uh-oh, he's going to put them upstairs in the bathtub now. Can you imagine putting them in the bathtub here?
Mm-hmm. And they would sit on them.
Yeah. He told Pam about using the tub. "Our bathtub?" asked Pam. Philip nodded. "How will we take our baths?" asked Pam. "Can't you do it without a bath for one night?" "I could go without one for a year." "Are we going to keep the frogs that long?" "No, silly, just until I get another pond to put them in." "Now that's enough questions. Let's think about how we're going to get them upstairs and into the bathtub." Mother and the last of the few guests were still around the front door. Ellen was back in the kitchen. There was only one stairway up, and they couldn't get to it. Suddenly, Philip's face brightened. The windows, that's it. We'll bring the frogs up to the bathroom windows. He got busy. Pam, run to the house and get some very heavy string. Mindy, help me get the bicycle basket off my bike. In a short while, they had it all set up. They tied one end of the string around a bar in the bathroom. They attached the other to the wire bicycle basket. Staying in the bathroom, Philip lowered the basket out the window. See him lowering out the window? To Mindy down below. She loaded the basket with a jar of frogs. Philip pulled it up. Pam helped empty the frogs into the tub. Philip lowered the basket again for another load. With another load and another load and another load, all the frogs were soon safely upstairs in the bathtub. So they're putting all the frogs in the bathtub? Okay. Philip covered the tub with a sheet so the frogs couldn't jump out. Then Philip, Pam, and Mindy sat on the floor alongside the tub with their heads under the sheet to admire the frogs. They saw how the frogs leaped with their eyes closed and pulled in. Funny eyes, the top lids went down and the bottom lids went up. There was a third lid too, which covered the eyes underwater. Yet the frog could see through the lid. One frog was puffed up big and fat with a large bubble under his chin. They could have watched the frogs forever, but they heard Mindy's mother calling her. "I have to go now," said Mindy. "If you need me, send an SOS." SOS means emergency. That evening, Grandpa and Grandma came to dinner. They were having their soup when Father asked, "How did your Red Cross sewing circle go this afternoon?" Philip stared down into his soup. He knew Mother never spoke about anything unpleasant at the dinner table, and surely not in front of the Grandma and Grandpa. She always waited until after dinner. "Oh, we had some uninvited guests," said Mother sweetly. Is that so?" said Father as he slowly drank his soup. "We had some frogs in for tea." Grandma and Grandpa and Father smiled. Philip and Pam started to worry. "And did they take sugar and cream with their tea?" asked Father with a grin. "Rick. What's that?" asked the grown-ups. Pam said, "Maybe it's Alice. That bad cat ate a goldfish today. I guess she doesn't feel very well now." Philip wondered, could it be the missing frog? Or is it one from the bathtub in a tiny voice? He offered to see what made the noise. Halfway up the stairs sat a big green frog. It looked at Philip and croaked. "Ribbit." Philip looked hard at the frog. Then suddenly he tried to grab it. But the big frog was faster than Philip. It leaped through the widespread legs and down 5 steps. Again it croaked. "Ribbit." To Philip, the frog seemed to be saying, "Ha ha! You can't even catch a frog." The whole family left the dinner table to see what was going on. Grandma and Grandpa were very excited. Father said, I see one of the guests forgot to go home." Pam whispered something to Philip and slipped upstairs. In a moment she returned with his net. The frog, meanwhile, had hopped into the living room. He leaped from the floor to the piano bench, to the keyboard, to the top of the piano. He took a stand there beside a bowl of roses and seemed to invite Philip to get him. We'll finish tomorrow.